Is this some kind of joke? Kyle Harrison's voice cracked through the dusty air like a whip. At 31, he was the youngest site engineer Meridian Construction had ever promoted to lead a major project. His hard hat was pristine, his safety vest reflective, and his clipboard filled with schedules that were already 3 weeks behind. He did not have time for problems, especially not from the old Mexican laborer standing in front of him. Roberto Mendez held his ground. At 70, his body was a map of hard labor. Calloused hands, weathered skin, a slight stoop from decades of carrying loads that would break younger men. He wore the same faded work clothes as every other day laborer on the site, indistinguishable from the dozens of men who hauled materials and cleaned debris for minimum wage. "Mr. Harrison, I'm telling you there's a problem with the south support column on level 12. The concrete is cracking in a pattern I've seen before. It's not settling. It's failing." Kyle let out an exasperated sigh. "And how would you know that? You carry bricks, Mr. Mendez. You don't analyze structural integrity. We have engineers for that. Actual engineers. With degrees." "I understand, sir, but if you would just look. I don't have time to look at every crack in every wall because some laborer thinks he's an expert." Kyle jabbed his finger at the towering skeleton of steel and concrete behind them. "This building is on schedule for the first time in 2 months. The concrete was poured according to spec. The rebar placement was verified. Everything has been inspected and approved. By professionals." Roberto's voice remained calm. "The inspection was 3 days ago. The temperature dropped below freezing that night. If the concrete hadn't cured properly before the freeze, the expansion could have created internal fractures that wouldn't be visible on the surface." Kyle stared at him. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or curiosity. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar armor of authority. "Mr. Mendez, I appreciate your concern, but you need to stay in your lane. Go back to hauling materials. Let the engineers handle engineering." He turned and walked away, already on his radio calling about delivery schedules. Roberto watched him go, then looked up at the building. 20 stories of concrete and steel, rising against a gray winter sky. On level 12, barely visible from this angle, he could see the south support column. And he could see what Kyle couldn't. The subtle bulge in the concrete, the hairline cracks spreading like a spider web. He'd seen that pattern before, in buildings that didn't stay standing. He found his way to the construction elevator and rode it up to 12. The floor was busy with workers, welders, electricians, concrete finishers. The air smelled of burnt metal and wet cement. Nobody paid attention to the old laborer walking among them. He was invisible, just another body in a hard hat. The south column was massive, 3 feet in diameter, designed to bear the weight of 8 floors above it. Roberto pressed his palm against the surface. It was cold, too cold for concrete that should have cured by now. He pulled out a small pocket knife and scraped gently at a crack. The material that came away was powet and crumbly, not the hard gray of properly cured concrete. His stomach tightened. This wasn't a minor flaw. This was catastrophic failure waiting to happen. The column was compromised throughout. When it went, not if, when, it would take the floors above with it. Anyone on levels 12 through 20 would be buried under thousands of tons of debris. He had to warn them. But Kyle wouldn't listen. The site supervisors wouldn't listen to a laborer. He needed to find someone who would. That's when he heard the sound. A deep, groaning creak that seemed to come from the bones of the building itself. The workers around him paused, looking up. Someone laughed nervously. "Just settling," a voice said. "Buildings do that." But Roberto knew better. That wasn't settling. That was stress. The column was already under more load than it could bear. They had minutes, maybe less. He grabbed the nearest worker, a young electrician with a tool belt. "You need to get everyone off this floor. Now." The kid looked at him like he was crazy. "What? Who are you?" "There's no time to explain. The south column is failing. This floor is going to collapse." "You're out of your mind, old man. Get back to work." Another groan, louder this time. A chunk of concrete the size of a fist fell from somewhere above, shattering on the floor. Now people were paying attention. And then, with a sound like thunder, the world began to fall apart. The south column didn't explode. It crumbled. The concrete disintegrated from the inside out, unable to bear the weight it was designed to carry. The floor lurched violently, throwing workers off their feet. Steel beams screamed as they twisted under sudden uneven loads. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. Roberto grabbed a support beam and held on as the floor tilted beneath him. He'd felt this before, in Baghdad, when a parking structure collapsed during a controlled demolition that went wrong. In Bosnia, when artillery took out the foundation of a building he was inside. His body remembered what to do, even as his mind raced through calculations. The collapse wasn't total. Not yet. The building's redundant support structure was doing its job, redistributing load to other columns. But that redistribution was creating new stress points. He could hear them failing one by one, a cascade of cracks and groans working its way through the structure. "Everyone move north!" Roberto shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Get away from the south side! Move!" Some workers heard him and obeyed, scrambling toward the opposite end of the floor. Others were frozen in panic, or trapped under fallen debris. The young electrician Roberto had tried to warn was on the ground, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, dazed but alive. Roberto hauled him up. "Can you walk?" "I think, yeah." "Then walk. North side. Go." The floor lurched again. A section near the compromised column gave way entirely, opening a jagged hole that dropped straight down to level 11. A worker who'd been standing there vanished with a scream that was cut short. Roberto forced himself not to think about it. He couldn't save everyone. He could only save who he could reach. He moved through the chaos with purpose, pulling workers to their feet, pointing them toward the north stairwell. The construction elevator was useless now. The shaft had twisted when the floor shifted, jamming the car between levels. The only way out was the stairs. But when he reached the north stairwell, he found the door buckled in its frame, jammed shut by the structural deformation. Workers were pounding on it, screaming for help. "It won't open! We're trapped!" Roberto pushed through the crowd and examined the door. The frame had shifted about 3 inches, binding the door in place. Brute force wouldn't work. The more they pushed, the tighter it wedged. "Stop pushing," he ordered. "You're making it worse." "Then what do we do?" Roberto looked around, his mind racing. 12 workers on this floor, maybe more. The building was still shifting, still failing. They had minutes at best before the next column went. He needed to find another way out. His eyes fell on the floor plan posted on a nearby pillar. He studied it for 3 seconds, cross-referencing it with the structural knowledge burned into his brain from 26 years of combat engineering. Load-bearing walls, support columns, utility shafts. There, the HVAC shaft on the east side. It ran vertically through the building, large enough for a man to fit through. If they could access it, they could climb down to a lower floor and find an exit. "Follow me," he said. "I know another way." "Who put you in charge?" A burly concrete finisher stepped forward, his face twisted with fear and anger. "You're just a laborer. Where's the site engineer?" "The site engineer isn't here. I am, and I know how buildings fail. So you can follow me, or you can stay here and die. Your choice." The concrete finisher stared at him. Something in Roberto's voice, the absolute certainty, the calm authority, made him step back. "Everyone follow the old man," he said quietly. Roberto led them across the tilting floor, navigating around fallen debris and widening cracks. The HVAC shaft access panel was exactly where he expected it. He pulled it open, revealing a vertical shaft lined with ductwork and maintenance ladders. One at a time, climb down to level 10. The structure should be stable there. Workers started climbing, one after another. Roberto counted them as they went. 8, 9, 10. The building groaned again, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. More concrete fell from above. Move faster! 11 workers through. One more, the young electrician, still woozy from his head wound. Your turn, old man, the electrician said. Roberto shook his head. There might be others. I need to check. The floor's coming down! Then climb faster. He pushed the kid toward the shaft and turned back toward the chaos. Through the dust, he could see a shape on the ground near the south side. Someone was trapped under a fallen beam. He ran. The trapped worker was a woman, Maria, one of the few female laborers on the site. A steel beam had fallen across her legs, pinning her to the floor. She was conscious, face contorted in pain, fingers clawing at the concrete. Help me, please! Roberto dropped to his knees beside her. The beam was heavy, maybe 800 pounds, but it wasn't the weight that worried him. It was the angle. The beam was resting on a section of floor that was visibly cracking. If he lifted it wrong, the whole section could give way, taking both of them down. I'm going to get you out, he said, his voice steady. But I need you to stay very still. It hurts so much. I know. Stay with me. He examined the beam, calculating leverage points, load distribution, failure probabilities. His brain worked the way it had been trained, fast, precise, emotionless. This wasn't a person trapped under debris. This was a structural problem with a human variable. Solve the problem, save the variable. He found what he needed, a length of rebar sticking out from a broken section of floor. He wrenched it free and wedged it under the beam, creating a lever. But he couldn't lift it alone. Maria, when I push down on this bar, the beam will lift about 6 inches. That's all I can give you. You need to pull yourself out. Can you do that? I don't know. My legs. Don't think about your legs. Think about your arms. When I say go, you pull with everything you have. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Roberto positioned himself over the rebar, calculating the exact force needed. Too little and the beam wouldn't move. Too much and he'd destabilize the floor. Ready? Ready. Go! He threw his weight onto the lever. The beam lifted. 4 inches. 5. 6. Maria screamed and pulled, dragging herself backward. Her legs came free just as Roberto's strength gave out, and the beam crashed back down. The floor section cracked, but held. Can you stand? Maria tried, then collapsed. My ankle. I think it's broken. Roberto lifted her in a fireman's carry, her weight settling across his shoulders. At 70, his body protested violently. His knees screamed. His back spasmed. He ignored it all. He moved toward the HVAC shaft, but the floor between them was now a maze of cracks and holes. The path he'd used before was gone, collapsed into the level below. His eyes scanned the space. Load paths, stress concentrations, failure sequences. There, along the north wall, where the floor was anchored to a primary support beam. That section would hold longest. He picked his way along the wall, stepping only where he calculated the floor could bear their weight. Behind him, the south section finally gave way completely, crashing down through level 11, then 10, then 9. The sound was apocalyptic. But the north section held. Roberto reached the HVAC shaft, empty. The other workers had made it down. Maria, I'm going to lower you into the shaft. There's a ladder. Can you hold on? I'll try. He eased her into the opening, guiding her hands to the rungs. She gasped in pain but held on. Climb down, slowly. I'm right behind you. She descended, one agonizing rung at a time. Roberto followed, muscles burning, lungs full of concrete dust. The shaft was dark except for emergency lighting below. They made it to level 10, just as level 12 completed its collapse. The roar above them was deafening, followed by debris clattering down the shaft. Roberto shielded Maria with his body. Then silence. The building was still groaning, still settling, but the immediate collapse had stopped. Everyone out, Roberto said, voice hoarse. East stairwell, move. The workers followed without question, carrying Maria between 2 men. Roberto led them down 8 flights, through a lobby filled with panicked office workers, and out into the cold winter air. Fire trucks and ambulances were arriving. Roberto set Maria down on a stretcher. She grabbed his hand. "Thank you. You saved my life. Rest now. You're safe." He turned and found himself face to face with Kyle Harrison. The young engineer's hard hat was gone, his safety vest torn, his face pale with shock. You got them out. All of them. 12 workers, all accounted for. How did you know? The shaft, the route, the timing. How did you know? Roberto looked at the young engineer for a long moment. Around them, chaos continued, sirens, shouting, the distant rumble of settling debris. "Because I've done this before," Roberto said quietly. "Many times." "Done what?" "You're a laborer. Now I carry materials. Before, I built things. And destroyed things." Roberto pulled out an old slide rule from his pocket. "I was an Army combat engineer for 26 years. I built bridges under enemy fire in Vietnam, demolished buildings in Baghdad, reinforced structures in Bosnia while artillery fell around us." Kyle stared at the slide rule. "Combat engineer. You're a combat engineer." "Was. Retired now. But the knowledge doesn't retire. When I saw that column this morning, I knew exactly what was happening. I've seen concrete fail in freezing conditions. I know the sounds buildings make before they fall." "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "I tried to tell you about the column. You didn't want to hear it. You saw an old Mexican laborer and decided I had nothing valuable to say." Kyle's face flushed with shame. "I could have gotten everyone killed. But you didn't. They're alive. That's what matters." A fire captain approached. "We need to know the building's status. Is it going to keep collapsing?" Kyle looked at Roberto. Roberto stepped forward. The collapse was localized to the south quadrant, levels 12 through 9. Primary failure was a support column with freeze-thaw damage. The north and east sections are anchored to independent support systems. They should hold. The captain frowned. "And you are?" "Roberto Mendez, Army Corps of Engineers, retired. 26 years structural demolition and combat construction." The captain pulled out a radio. "Command, I've got a structural expert on scene, Army Corps. He says north and east sections are stable, recommending we proceed with rescue operations." For the next 6 hours, Roberto worked alongside rescue teams. He identified safe paths, predicted secondary collapse risks, and guided firefighters to pockets where survivors might be trapped. They found 2 workers given up for dead, sheltered in a void space Roberto had predicted would form. By nightfall, the operation was complete. 14 workers had been on levels 12 through 20. 12 escaped through the HVAC shaft. 2 more pulled from rubble alive. No fatalities. Kyle found Roberto sitting on a concrete barrier, drinking coffee. "I owe you an apology, not just for today, for how I treated you, for not listening." Roberto sipped his coffee. "You're young. You have degrees and think that means you know things. But knowledge isn't wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, from failure, from watching things go wrong and learning why. I almost learned that lesson the hard way." "Almost is good enough, if you remember it." Kyle was quiet. "The company will investigate. They'll want to know why the column failed. They'll find the concrete was poured when temperatures were borderline. Curing time was shortened for schedule. Inspection was done before freeze damage could manifest. Corners were cut because someone worried more about deadlines than safety." Kyle flinched. "I pushed for that schedule. And now you know the cost. 14 lives almost lost. A building partially demolished. Millions of dollars." Roberto stood up. "You have a choice now. Hide from this, blame others, or stand up, take responsibility, and make sure it never happens again. What would you do?" "I've made that choice before. Both ways. Trust me, the truth is easier to live with." 2 weeks later, Kyle testified before the company's review board. He took full responsibility. He recommended new protocols for cold weather construction and mandatory curing verification. He also recommended Roberto Mendez be hired as structural safety consultant. Roberto declined, too old for meetings and paperwork. But he accepted a position as unofficial site safety advisor, an old man who walked construction sites and looked at things. Workers learned to pay attention when he stopped and stared. Engineers learned to listen when he spoke. Some lessons are written in textbooks. Others are written in concrete and steel and the lives that depend on them. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet masters who prove that true expertise isn't about credentials. It's about knowing what matters and having the courage to speak up.